Well, if there is no God, the suffering of animals is not evil, it just is. And for you to put a value judgment on it, that it's evil or bad, that's your own illusion. That's your own fantasy.
An atheist student raises tough challenges. Why doesn't a loving God make himself clearer? And why does he allow animal suffering? Cliffe pushes back, saying atheism can't explain justice or evil, while Christianity not only names the problem, but offers hope in Christ. What do you think? Does atheism or faith provide the stronger foundation for truth and morality? Let us know in the comments. And now, let's get into the debate.
Have you heard of Schellenberg's non-resistant non-belief?
No, I haven't. What is that?
There's three basic premises to the argument, but in general, he's saying that if God is all-loving, which in the Christian view he is,
yes,
there's no reason for there to be people who are not resistant to the idea of God. I would consider myself non-resistant. I'm personally an atheist because that's where the evidence has led me.
Right.
But I have put a lot of effort into trying to figure out the truth. And I would personally say that I'm not resistant to God, but yet I still don't believe in him. And how could an all-loving God allow a case like that to exist?
I would argue that love demands free will. If it ain't free, it ain't love. It's manipulated, it's coerced, but it's not real love. I would argue to really love someone, you got to make a free decision.
The amount of effort that I've put in to figuring out Christianity, learning about Christianity, I personally wasn't raised with any religion.
Yes.
But for some reason, whatever reason, all the evidence that I've come across through reading the Bible, going to church, talking to my Christian friends, listening to debates, something in my psyche has just told me that atheism is more convincing than theism. How is that my fault that the evidence was not convincing enough to me?
Okay, well, what do you mean when you say atheism is more convincing? How is atheism more convincing to you than Jesus Christ?
There's a lot of things that I could say.
We'll just start at the top, the best reasons.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is the problem of animal suffering is really difficult to contend with in religion.
Yes.
I know for the problem of evil, a lot of Christians say free will, which I understand that argument, but it becomes more difficult when you talk about animal suffering in the wild that doesn't have any human influence, and why would a loving God allow the starvation, disease, predation on billions of animals every day? They're truly suffering.
Yes,
and there's no promise of heaven for them because in the Christian view, animals don't have souls. So that just seems really unjust to me, and a loving God wouldn't create that type of system.
Okay, I respect your sensitive conscience. Who defines justice? Why are you so outraged that animals suffer innocently? If there is no God, what is, is. It's not good. It's not evil. You use the word evil. Who defines evil? If there is no God, evil is totally subjective, totally relative. It's a crapshoot.
In the atheistic worldview, the world that we see totally makes sense. I'm saying that in the evolution, I would expect to see the world that we're observing with the atheistic worldview, but in a Christian worldview, that's where the problem lies. I'm not saying that.
Don't you see the way you're contradicting yourself? What do you mean? In the atheistic worldview, it makes sense. When you're standing here saying the suffering of innocent animals is evil. Well, if there is no God, the suffering of animals is not evil, it just is. And for you to put a value judgment on it, that it's evil or bad, that's your own illusion. That's your own fantasy. The same way for me to say, if he smacks you in the face, that's evil. Well, that's not evil. He just smacked you in the face. What is.
A better way to phrase the question would be, do you think animal suffering is evil?
Yeah, God clearly
How do you
says,
contend with
don't
that?
cause any animal to suffer. So yes, inflicting pain on animals is not good.
No, but I'm talking about just in nature, like without human involvement. Do you think like a baby deer dying of a disease and suffering a slow death
Is bad.
Okay, so how does a Christian God contend with that?
It's not God who's causing an animal to suffer. It's not God who's causing a person to suffer. That's because they're born into an unfair, messed up world. It's a consequence.
But God is, in the Christian view, is always just and correct, and
God
why
is
should-
just. Yes?
If animals don't have souls, they don't have sin,
Yeah?
which is typically like the Christian reason why humans suffer is because we're sinful. And
No.
we have free will.
No.
And we can choose our own.
No, ma'am. Just
But
read the book
why
of Job. Job suffers. His
Yeah.
buddies come to him and say, watertight case. We know why you're suffering, Job, because you sinned. Totally wrong. And the book of Job makes that crystal clear. When they told Job, hey, Job, we know why you're suffering. It's because you're a sinner. And if you just were to repent of your sin, you'd stop suffering. God was angry with them. They were lying. They were inaccurate. See, ma'am, you and I are born, and animals are born into an unfair, messed up world. And that's why you reel back with indignation, and that's good. You should. And that's why Jesus, when he walked on earth, healed the sick, raised the dead, fed the hungry, because he knew this ain't right. This is not good. This is lousy. You're absolutely correct, ma'am. But you see, if you're an atheist, you're wiping out the basis for understanding this sucks. This is horrible. Because what you're saying is, all of reality is a result of the evolutionary cycle. So this animal, the reason this animal suffers is because of evolution. That's despair if you think about it. I respect you a lot for the way you have just expressed moral outrage over innocent animal suffering. Bravo. But the whole basis of your outrage is a theistic worldview, which says there is a God who created things a certain way. Things got royally messed up. And now the question is, what's the solution to the mess?
Just to get back to my original question,
Yes.
how would you contend with a case like me, someone who's trying to figure out the truth, actively learning about Christianity and theism in general,
Yeah.
and yet the arguments just haven't been convincing to me? Do you think it's something in my subconscious? Am I actually secretly resistant? And if it is in my subconscious or I'm unconscious of it,
Yeah.
then how can I be held liable in the afterlife for
Okay.
my thoughts here?
Obviously, ma'am, I don't know what's motivating you. I think it would be incredibly judgmental for me to try and tell you what's motivating you. Here's what I would have to say to myself. All right, Cliff, you have decided that there is not enough evidence for Christ. No problem, Cliff. But listen to yourself talk. There's not enough evidence for me to believe in Christ, which means before I can accept anything, I must have X amount of evidence before I can trust. See what you're saying? You're saying there's not enough evidence for Christ. No problem, I understand. But what you're saying is, Cliff, in order for me to live for Christ, this standard of evidence must be met. No problem. What's the option that meets that standard of evidence?
I recognize obviously like Jesus is a historical figure.
Yeah.
I guess my problems are more like logical, like problems with theism in general, not necessarily just Christianity.
Okay, now
And I don't know exactly what would be convincing to me, if that answers your question better.
that last statement began to get at it, but ma'am, you still haven't answered the question. What are you living for today that is supported by enough evidence? In other words, what has more evidence to support it than Jesus Christ?
I personally don't believe in any religion.
Or philosophy?
I'm just trying to understand what
You
you're
bet.
asking, so
You cannot be a student at this fine university without being a pretty motivated person, which means you have priorities. It means you have ambition. It means you are living for something that you cannot prove to anybody is the truth. But you have attached a great deal of meaning to your life. That's why you dress in an orderly, beautiful way. That's why you articulate in an orderly speech. And that's why you're at this fine university. You're not here by accident. So what are you living for? In other words, what have you put your faith in? You've got faith. You can't prove to me that UConn's not going to say on your day of graduation, hey, guess what, guys? No diplomas this year. We're going to break tradition. No diplomas. It could happen. But obviously the evidence is that UConn does not do that. And that's why you're investing a fair amount of money and work to get a diploma. That's faith. You can't prove it, but there's evidence. So, you've said to me, sorry, Cliff, not enough evidence to support Christ. No problem. Now, you've got to answer the question, if you're going to be intellectually consistent and honest, what is the option that is supported by more evidence than Christ that you're living for?
I think I just don't understand what you're saying, because I just want to say atheism. I think atheism has more evidence, but I sense that
you
I'm
can't
not
live as an
understanding
atheist.
your question.
All right, let's put it this way. This guy says to me, Cliff, why don't you believe in Jesus? And I say, because there's not enough evidence. And he says, okay, Cliff, then what are you living for? And I say, well, nothing. I'm not living for anything. I'm lying.
Okay.
Look
So,
at the way I'm dressed.
What do I value?
Yeah.
I value
Human value,
True.
human meaning and purpose,
Education.
ethics.
Yeah.
Okay, but what are you living for? And then what's the evidence that whatever it is you are living for is true?
I value like education and happiness.
And happiness?
I personally think you find meaning from your life by finding your own happiness. I don't know if that makes sense to you. I can get
Sure it
more
does.
specific, but
That makes a ton of sense. Okay, now, you've basically communicated my faith is in myself ultimately. I define happiness and the best way to happiness. I define education as a worthy priority in my life. Okay, so what is the evidence that you are more reliable than Christ? Obviously, you've chosen to trust yourself.
yeah. I'd say I just don't. Yeah, I don't really know what you want me to say.
I just
Like
want
the
you to say what you believe in and why you're living for whatever it is you're living for. That's all.
Why do I live for happiness?
Why have you decided to trust yourself as being ultimately reliable instead of trusting Christ? Christ doesn't have enough evidence, so what's the evidence that supports you being so reliable that to put your faith in yourself is wiser, a better decision than putting your faith in Christ?
I don't think I have that much like faith in the religious sense in myself. I try to do what I think is best every day, and sometimes that ends up being wrong. Sometimes that ends up being right. But I don't have to. I'm not saying that what I believe in and how I live my life is correct. I'm just doing the best that I can. I'm not trying to convince anybody else here of atheism, but you're trying to convince people here of Christianity. So I don't think I have to contend with the same things that you do.
Oh, come on. Come on now, you can see through that. Ma'am, you're doing something far more significant with your faith than standing out here and talking. You're living your life a certain way. You're treating people a certain way. You're handling money a certain way. You're handling education a certain way. You know very well that the way you live your life shows what you really believe about reality. You know, I'm not sure he's really standing here, okay? I'm not sure. I'm agnostic. I don't know. Right about now, I got to make a decision. Is the preponderance of evidence that pointing to his face starting right there, or can I really believe that his face isn't there, it's just an illusion I'm having? I'm agnostic. I don't know. Well, right about now, I'm going to have to make a decision. I have no choice. Ma'am, you live your life. You have to make choices. Is he valuable or is he trash?
I think human life is valuable.
Why? Why is human life valuable?
I'd say human life is valuable just because we can create meaningful connections and have relationships and have an overall positive experience in life, even if that means in the atheistic worldview that there's nothing in the afterlife. I think even if there's no afterlife, life can still be meaningful.
Okay, before we go on, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for this discussion. This is why I do what I do. And you obviously respect me enough to think very clearly and articulate yourself, and I cannot thank you enough. You've made my day, okay? I'm serious. No, you have. You've totally made my day. Okay, but ma'am, remember something. If what you say is true, then if I tell you the meaning of my life is to smack him in the face, you cannot look at me and say, oh no, you're wrong, Cliff. You can just say, well, Cliff, from my perspective, that's wrong. But from your perspective, obviously, it's right to smack him in the face. Why? Because as an atheist, you understand it's all relative. Which means your definition of good and evil is, don't smack him in the face, but it is relative. So if my definition is, oh, you can smack him in the face, Cliff, you're not wrong. You just make your own relative decision. And you see, you can't live that out.
I think evolutionarily, though, like the reason why we don't go around murdering people and harming others and we have morality in our society is because that was beneficial to us in our tribes when we were evolving as early humans. And the humans that were violent and didn't want to work together, they didn't survive. So I think a lot of our morality comes from evolution.
You see, ma'am, if you think about it, that is the most blind leap of faith I have ever heard. Why? Because you're putting your faith in a myth, and it's called the myth of progress. That if we just trust the evolutionary cycle, we will get out of our jams. Ma'am, what was the bloodiest century of human history so far?
I'm not sure.
The 20th century. By far the bloodiest history, bloodiest part of human history. Mao Zedong, 37 million slaughtered. Joseph Stalin, 42 million slaughtered. Adolf Hitler, 20 million slaughtered. Pol Pot, 2 million slaughtered. There is no century in human history that is as bloody as the 20th century.
Don't we have more Christians than ever in the 20th century, like population-wise?
I can promise you, ma'am, that's where you got to be real honest with the Bible. Jesus points out that he has a great deal of good in him because he's created in the image of God. And he's also a dirty, rotten sinner, and so am I. Good and evil are within this guy's heart, and they're within my heart. And to be honest with you, I can do some pretty perverted things if there's nobody around to hold me accountable, and if you tick me off enough. I'm embarrassed to say that, I'm not proud of that fact, but it's true. All right? So, the fact that there are a bunch of, quote, Christians, unquote, doesn't mean much. Are they really genuinely following Christ? Not in Dachau and Auschwitz and Buchenwald. Not in the slaughter of people in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Not in Pol Pot's Cambodia. No, ma'am.
Yeah, but if your argument is that Christianity provides people with more morality, then you can't say that you can't use the argument that there's just been more violence in the 20th century, and that's why.
No, ma'am. The reason I raise that is because your hope, your confidence is in evolution. That evolution perfects things.
It doesn't perfect things, it selects for survivability.
So I'm currently someone who's like, I was raised as a Christian, I was an atheist for a while. I'm kind of finding God again, to some belief.
Sure.
And one of those things I battled with is, kind of like that morality thing. And when you look around at people that are religious, typically, not just Christian, I think any type of religion in general, I do think that they typically have better values, better morals. And he mentioned this, and I watch a lot of your videos. One of the things that he talks about a lot is not following the Bible directly and following the word of Jesus instead. And I think that when you follow something like the word of Jesus, it's kind of like a blueprint for like morals and values and stuff like that. It's not necessarily something that you have to follow. If you're a Christian, it's not like you're gonna have these morals. But like if you listen to the Bible and listen to the word of Jesus, not just what in general, there's like a blueprint for like morals and values and stuff to follow that I think you do see in like a very Christian community on large. Obviously, like you said, just being a Christian doesn't make you a good person. But it's that blueprint. Like I think that the Bible, and any religion in general, but for me, I'm more familiar with the Bible, gives you that blueprint of like, hey, this is how to be a good person. This is like what you should do. And I think there's just like thousands of people, thousands of years of history, people, and it's just like their observations of like, hey, you know, this is how you be successful, how you be a good person, and stuff like that. So I really think it's just a blueprint.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
If Christianity is true, I don't want to go to hell. So what would you say to me, who I don't think I'm a resistant non-believer?
Well, then I would appeal to Blaise Pascal, the brilliant French thinker. The wager. If you're right that there is no God, I don't lose anything. If I'm right that God is real and that Jesus Christ is the way to heaven, you lose everything.
If it was all that simple, then we wouldn't see so many conflicting religions. If there was enough evidence for everyone, if people just sat down and read the evidence, then I think we'd see a lot more Christians in the world. But we have so many different faiths because the religion that people were raised with is typically what they grow into.
Uh-huh.
I think if it were as simple as just reading more evidence, we wouldn't have religious wars. Everyone would probably be in the same religion. I think that's kind of reductive.
Uh-huh. Well, I think it's incredibly reductive to say that morality is relative, but then to start out your discussion with me by communicating your outrage over the suffering of animals. If there is no God and if everything's relative, why are you so upset about the suffering of animals?
Because I think pain is a bad thing.
Fine. You acknowledge it, it's all relative. So if it's all relative, what are you getting so stoked about? That animals suffer. It just is. If your worldview is right. See, my point is you're not living out your worldview. If I say, I believe in Jesus, and you watch me go out and womanize after I speak here, you're going to point your finger at my face and say, Cliff, you're a hypocrite. And you'd be right. Well, similarly, if you're going to tell me that everything's relative, but you're really outraged over the pain that animals experience, you're an intellectual hypocrite because you're contradicting what you believe.
I would argue that it's not a contradiction. I don't think you need to bring morality into the fact that we can, the world that we observe with how our ecosystems function and how much suffering is in nature.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to talk about moral relativism to understand that that's...
Okay, man, you started it. You said evil.
Because
that's a moral statement.
I'm
evil.
saying Christians need to contend with that, not atheists.
You're outraged over what you call evil.
Yeah,
you can't escape it.
I'm not bringing up morality, you are.
No, you brought it up when you said evil. You were the first one to say evil.
Evil in the Christian sense.
Don't be so upset about animals.
I'm asking why you believe in it. I feel like there's like a misunderstanding.
Oh, no. I communicate. No. There's no misunderstanding, ma'am.
Okay, so then why...
I communicated crystal clearly to you. In Genesis 3, we read how human beings rebelled against God and the earth was cursed. And we went over Job together. And we pointed out that life is unfair. So animals and human beings are born into an unfair world. It's not fair. That is why Jesus came. To solve the unfairness, to solve death, to give eternal life. See, if you're an atheist, not only do you have no basis for saying that's really wrong, you have no basis for saying there's hope for the future. Because as we talked about, evolutionary optimism is bankrupt. Evolution does not solve our problems.
Evolutionists aren't claiming that, first off.
There are many Americans who have embraced an optimism based on evolution that is unfounded. It's intellectual suicide.
Okay, well,
based on the 20th century. And all the people were slaughtered.
Yeah, but evolution isn't saying that we're going to eventually reach some, like...
I am aware of that, that's right. But philosophically, that's where many go.
Okay, that's just not where I go.
Well, where do you go? What's your view of the future?
I don't know what my view of the future. Like, you mean like...
come on, you have hope for the future?
Humans?
Don't you have hope for the future?
A reasonable amount.
What's it based on? Why do you have hope for the future?
I think everyone is trying to do their best every day. And
really? Including Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Hitler, Pol Pot. Everyone's trying to do their best. Is that why we lock our doors? Is that why we pass legislation against racist policies? Because everyone's trying to do their best? Come on, ma'am.
I think that like Hitler truly believed that what he was teaching was correct. Even though it was
Yeah.
egregiously, horribly, horrifically wrong, I think in his sick brain,
Yeah?
he thought that he was doing what was best.
And man, my point is very simply, we agree about Hitler, but you have no basis for saying that what Hitler did was wrong, because you're a moral relativist.
Yeah.
And if you're a moral relativist, what Hitler did is not absolutely wrong, it's relatively wrong.
Yeah, I'm
I think
similar.
I can still say that it was wrong.
Yeah, from your perspective.
That's kind of what his point though, is that like when you talk about someone like bad like Hitler, right? It's all kind of like relative of what you think is good or bad, but what he thought that was good though. And there were people that followed what he believed, but a framework like Christianity, for example, kind of like outlines like, hey yo, I'm not gonna use Christianity because I have my own problems with Christianity still, but like specifically more so Jesus, right? He more so is like, nah, like killing all these people is wrong, right? Like if you think like, so you're maybe not what the Bible says, but what would Jesus do? It kind of gives you that like more framework of like, all right, now it's not just relative. It's not just like, oh yeah, Hitler thought he was good, so hey, in his eyes good. No, there's like some higher framework now saying, hey yo, nah, that's not really great. And I think that what gives Christianity a little bit of like basis there is that it is over thousands of years. You know, you got to figure the Bible was written by hundreds of people over thousands of years, and it's all collected stories. So these are like kind of like compiled history of like, hey, this is what throughout human history we have come to the conclusion this is bad. So that relative like, hey, what I'm doing is good doesn't stand anymore because now you have a framework, you know. And there are a lot
It's called
of
cultural arrogance.
I mean-
I'm an arrogant twit if I look at Hitler and say, oh, that was evil. I'm an arrogant twit if I look at Joseph Stalin and say, oh, that was evil. What I should say is, from my cultural perspective, from my biased position, what you guys did was wrong. But that's just my opinion, because it's all relative. And I can't live that way. When I am confronted by a Joseph Stalin or an Adolf Hitler, I don't say, well, my subjective opinion is that that was really naughty. No, I reel with moral indignation saying that was absolutely evil. Just look at the Nuremberg trials. The Nazi officers had some brilliant lawyers. And the lawyers said, whoa, 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 time out. Who do you Americans think you are, and Europeans, judging Nazis? Don't you realize the Nazi officers were just doing what their superiors told them to do? And the Nuremberg trial shut down. Until Robert Jackson, the American counsel, stood up and said, wait a second, there is a law above the law of culture. And according to this law, it makes judgments on people gassing Jews. It's absolutely wrong. What do you think Dr. Martin Luther King wrote in the letter to the Birmingham jail? He wrote, I understand. The great state of Alabama has said segregation is good. But guess what, guys? There is a law above the law of the great state of Alabama. And according to this law, segregation is evil. Well, what was King referring to? Obviously, he was referring to the law of God and saying, guess what? If a racist state of Alabama supports segregation, that doesn't make it right. I don't care how much of the culture accepts it. But if there is no God, ma'am, there is nobody above the great state of Alabama. And it's all relative. But Dr. Martin Luther King understood rubbish. There is a God, an intelligent mind, above the laws of the great state of Alabama, and according to God's law, racism is evil. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and I could point out like some stories in the Bible that I think are morally wrong, like the slaughter of the Canaanites.
Yes. Yeah?
That's just the first one that comes to mind.
Sure.
But I do kind of want to take a step back, and if anybody else
You
wants
bet.
to talk.
Thank you so much for
Thank
talking with
you.
me. I appreciate it immensely. Thank you so much.